Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly politics show. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. So today we have Assembly member Murad Qureshi, and in this segment we're just going to go into the issues. So I'm going to hand them over to Andrew. Andrew, do you want to go through the issues that you're finding on the doorstep and put them towards Murad to get his views on them?
Yeah, so I actually did my first councillor surgery outside a few hours ago, sort of in a place called Mill Harbour. It was actually quite good. I actually had 7 people come up to me in the course of an hour. But actually Mill Harbour is the densest place in the United Kingdom. And it's very interesting that 5 of the 7 actually came to raise antisocial behaviour issues. And I think one of the problems I've always had is kind of like antisocial behaviour is kind of like a bit of a Cinderella service, both within councils and also with the Met Police as well, because it's a difficult thing for the police to deal alone with. So is that an issue that you're kind of picking up from other parts of London as well, that antisocial behaviour is a particular concern? Because I know in the last year it's definitely has increased in Tower Hamlets.
Well, the interesting thing about I've been physically limited for obvious reasons about where I can go around and about. And in my immediate neighbourhood, along the edge of the road, on the boundary of the old Paddington and Marylebone, that there have been issues like that, but there have also been dreadful issues, quite honestly, about stabbings. We've had far too many in my neighbourhood, let alone the whole of London. I mean, for example, in the last few weeks, we've had no less than two within half a mile of where I live, and neighbourhoods that I grew up. So those have been very permanent on my mind. I think police numbers are part of it, but I think offering youth services as well, young men particularly, other things to do. And we've also had COVID. I mean, let's face it, a lot of us have found ourselves spending a lot more time at home, working as well as living. Can you imagine what that must be like for the kids, and particularly in places which are very densely packed and there's not much green space? So yes, there have been tensions there, undoubtedly, and very often I don't think it's necessarily a policing issue. It's only when people go over the top with it, I think. What we need to do is build a London that is resistant to what gives us more space and facilities to live these lives in pandemics as much as when we get out of pandemics. I'm quite keen to see the nature of what we build now changing and given bigger considerations about more space within homes and outside of homes, so people are less confined. So I think it's largely a response to the pandemic restrictions we've rightly had on public health grounds. But it'll be interesting to watch that one. Yeah. And there's also the particular problem of stabbings. I mean, for example, when I've been briefed by the police, they feared that there would be possibly more as soon as the restrictions and lockdown are rolled out.
Yeah, no, we've definitely had an increase in stabbings, and the first fatality, again, as you said, quite close to where I live as well, which we've never seen before. The other question I kind of had when you were talking about, the history of the 3 mayors is, I mean, there's an argument to make that Ken, has been far and away the most important mayor because he kind of set the foundation stones in a lot of areas. So, for example, the London plan, what's in the current London plan? Yes, there have been changes, but they're pretty much based on what he started. So would you agree that he has been the most consequential mayor so far in terms of what the mayors have done since his start?
Well, Andrew, you've taken the words straight out of my mouth. Yes, without any doubts. I think, he's. I think the trick that he did and understood was making the most of the limited powers he had at the time and not moaning about it. He just got on with it. And I do know that kind of the work he did in things like Crossrail 1, or the buses, and getting the Olympics. A lot of people still admire him for that, and it's actually in quarters you would least expect. I mean, For example, when I've when I've been in touch with London First and people like that, big business in London, they certainly think the foresight of Ken is something which we don't actually appreciate enough. I think what it was that he had a particular strategic perspective on London, which I don't think that we've seen much of, and it's rare, and it's not surprising actually, because being the last leader of the GLC, I think he had some idea of what he could do and what has to be done. And I think there was less emphasis on the media then. At the time when Ken was mayor, I don't think we had the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week media circus we have now, where things become news instantly and then dissipate. And I think one of the things anyone in public office has to do is get that balance right. I think between responding to events and actually and being on top of them. And I think very often that means, getting your feet under a table. And that certainly was, I think, Ken's approach to things. He saw some strategic things that had to be done and he got on with it. And most of them he delivered, to his credit. I only regret that the bridge, Thames Gateway Bridge, wasn't built further down the river from yourselves. I think that was the only one which I think unfortunately didn't happen in his time.
Okay. So the next question is kind of about your role. And in the first segment, you kind of talked a bit about the things that you've done personally. And I've tried to describe what you do as kind of being like a councillor, but at a London-wide level. But is that true? And how would you describe your role? And what are the kind of things that residents should be coming to you for help with in the future? Assuming you're re-elected, of course.
Of course. Let's not assume anything at all. Because and that happened last time to me. So I'm certainly not taking any assumptions there at all. No, look, I mean, like councillors, we do have constituency work. I mean, most of ours come invariably by emails rather than surgeries as such, which is traditionally what I did as a councillor and what many councillors do. But we're able to get through to people at TfL, the police, the Met, and what have you, with queries that a council may not be able to. I'm not saying they don't have access, but I think the lines of responsibilities are clearer with the morality. Let's face it, most of the council tax people pay is paying for the Met, and TfL, if they may seem as though pretty unaccountable, they do realise that we in the Assembly can make a fuss about their activities. Recently, for example, I've been helping a lot of people with their parking fines, and by and by, I'm quite successful in getting those receded from them. So I hope people remember that when I've managed to do that for them. So that's the kind of day-to-day stuff that we get. One of the areas that we do, I mean, I've been the housing chair for the last year or so, housing committee, and actually it's funny, I've had exorbitant amounts of questions and issues raised from that, but I'm sorry to say the chair of housing isn't the same as the chair of housing in the old GLC. Neither the mayor nor the Assembly has any charge over properties itself. I've heard plenty of complaints, and I'm very concerned that many Londoners in housing association properties are not very happy at all. And I tell HAs very clearly that you need to do something. You need to be on top of this. It's all very well expanding your empires across 33 boroughs in the whole of London, but at the end of the day, people that are residents and tenants are going to judge you by the quality of the housing services. I actually did put in a complaint about one of the large players, and I still come up with instances which just stagger me, quite honestly. That I think is me taking a strategic perspective, whereas I think in councils you can only do it within your local authority boundaries. And let's face it, many HAs operate across many local government political boundaries. So that's the kind of day-to-day stuff. We do also kind of look more strategically at things. You mentioned the London plan. And it wasn't, I mean, I think one of the biggest influences Ken had was encouraged in the first format of the London plan that you can go, developments can go up where the transport infrastructure can support it. And I mean, the best example I can give is actually it's not just in central London; it's at the town centres across all London. You know, the Uxbridges and what have you. The best example I can give you is in Hayes and Harlington. It's the last stop before you get to Heathrow Airport, and I've seen the skyline there go up substantially. So that came from the London vision, encapsulated it in the London plan. And you're right, Boris and subsequently Sadiq have kind of built on it, on top of it, and refined it not only for their vision, but also in light of present circumstances. Now that may critically change now. I mean, we're all aware that many of us aren't going to go back to offices and are prepared to work at home now, given that we've got used to that. And it'll be interesting to see whether we'll get as many office developments and whether all the office developments in the pipeline could be converted to housing, for example. That's something that if I get another term, I would be very keen to investigate on behalf of Londoners and councils to see how feasible that is. It's something I think we've talked about loosely, generically. People, when they've discussed such matters as one of the legacies of living through this pandemic lockdown. But yeah, I would like to see whether that actually has got legs. I know there's plenty of office developments that have come up around me in Paddington and Marylebone. Will they stand up at all now financially, and will they have to look at other uses? So that's a strategic issue which I think we can give some discourse on, and even the mayor, quite honestly. And who knows? I mean, a good mayor will pinch our best ideas, like Ken did as well. Ken did during his 2 terms as mayor of London.
Okay, so I'm actually also the councillor for Canary Wharf ward. So I've got Canary Wharf for my ward. So these are really live issues for us, and the future of the estate, and what you said about housing associations is absolutely right. They're not as good as they should be. So we only got a couple of minutes left. So probably maybe the last question would be, obviously we've got the elections coming, and we've got lots of ballot papers, 3 for London. Maybe just worth explaining what the difference is between the 2 assembly member ballot papers, because I know some people will get confused by that.
Well, thank you for giving me a bit of scope to explain that. Essentially, there's 25 assembly members elected at the same time as the mayor. And there's 2 times. One has a constituency, a geographical area, and others, like me, have a geographic task of spreading themselves across the whole of London. So in your case, where you're physically based in Tower Hamlets, you have the City and East London constituency, and we will have, and you're incorporated with in that constituency with Newham, Barking and Dagenham, and the City of London. That's actually a huge constituency. So you'd have 1 assembly member representing you across all 4 local authorities on transport, environment, policing, housing, a number of things. I think it's far too big a plate. But an even bigger plate is for us London-wide assembly members. And that's on the second ballot, where you don't actually choose a name and a party. You just choose a party. And when you choose a party, they have a list system, and on the basis of the order of the list, they put forward people like myself to be brought into the assembly to lead on London-wide issues.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, if I remember rightly, I think that ballot is orange, and the ballot for the London-wide assembly is pink. But the pink may be the mayoral one. No, pink, yellow, orange. Sorry, pink, yellow, orange.
We'll remind people on social media which one. Yeah, and then the 2 referendums will be white. I know that. So
So I mean, that for those with postal votes, well, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be easier for you to do than going in on the day and filling in all 5 of your ballots. But I hope that the polling officers are patient when you're there with your pencil and pen to mark your preferences.
Yeah. Okay. Pirum, you're muted.
Thanks, Murad, for coming in. We're at the end of our show. We're going to finish early today, 7:30. Next week we'll probably have a new time. We'll advertise it, Andrew and I, and we'll basically carry on with the weekly politics show. But thank you again. Thank you, Murad Qureshi, Assembly Member, for joining us. But thank you, listeners, for listening in. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood, and thank you again for watching the weekly politics show. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.